Hey everyone, Dylan Welch here. Before we get into our episode, I want to share some really awesome news. Right now, there are so many ways to get involved if you want a job, a career, or volunteer in renewable energy, clean tech, or sustainability. Check out the Mother Earth is Hiring program brought to us by Southern Company. Protecting our planet is a job we all must take on, whether that is something simple like using a reusable water bottle, bag, getting an electric vehicle, solar panels, career change, or just volunteering and taking those little steps to get more involved. Southern Company has made it so easy for all of us to get involved and find a way to get the ball rolling, to commit to taking on a job which is caring for our planet. Check out the Mother Earth page today. Visit our green_org Instagram page for the link in our bio, and we'll also link it in this episode. Thank you so much. Let's kick off the show. Right here, Troy was just a recent guest on the Green podcast a couple weeks ago and is just a fascinating guy doing so many cool things. He's an athlete. He's a really successful entrepreneur, really pushing the limits of what we can do with renewable energy and clean tech. So Troy, I'm going to let you kind of take over, maybe give a little bit of background. I mean, I know you have a presentation plan, so I'm going to just stop talking and I'm going to let you do your thing.
Great. Yeah, I think I'll focus today on EarthGrid, the startup company that I've been developing and doing R&D now for about 5 years. But I'll just share the picture behind me. That's Donald the donkey. I've been developing solar farms and wind farms for nearly 30 years. Donald protects sheep that act as our lawnmowers on on solar farms. So yeah, I think we've been kind of ahead of the curve, trying to be as sustainable as possible over the years. But I'll switch now to the picture of the plasma tunnel boring robot here that you can see behind me, and also a tunnel there. So I'll share my screen and we'll go over a quick presentation here, and then I'm sure you'll have a handful of questions. But we're going to talk about EarthGrid, and as I mentioned, it's been in development now for, I guess 5 years. And I'll tell you the genesis story of the company. So first of all, I should point out that I wrote a book called The Clean Power Revolution. It's been a long time ago now, 2005, so 17 years ago. But in the book, I talk about how we can convert North America to 100% renewable energy and actually save the U.S. economy $1 trillion a year. So maybe I was a little ahead of my time, but a big part of that is adding a lot of additional transmission lines to free up really cheap wind power and solar power. And really what got me into this is in 1998, I read an article actually, I guess it was 96, read an article that said that 3 states, Kansas, Texas, and North Dakota, could power the whole country with wind energy. And the solar potential is even more powerful. So EarthGrid is essentially trying to solve the problem of adding new transmission lines, because although I talked about it 17 years ago, it hasn't happened. It's been really frustrating. All right, so we'll dive right in here. So what's the problem? Overhead utility lines are unreliable. They're causing fires in the West, EMF, and in the Midwest and the East, ice storms and tornadoes and hurricanes are knocking them over. And it's not just our power that goes out. It's often our utility or our communication. So our cable or our fiber internet will go out as well, because a lot of those lines are also strung up on those ubiquitous wooden poles that are everywhere. But here's a statistic a lot of people might not be aware of. Over 80% of all of the solar and wind farms that are trying to get built in this country get canceled. And that's after about a 3.5-year wait on average, and about $500,000 per project of trying to get it to move forward, engineering and permitting and so forth. They're canceled because the studies come back from the local utility and the cost to upgrade the creaky old antiquated grid are so high that it kills the project. Again, we desperately need new transmission lines in this country to accelerate the clean power revolution. So why now? Well, historically, tunneling's always been super expensive. And like 7 to 20 times more expensive than putting power lines overhead. But we're not, and that's the reason we're not doing it. Europe has done a great job. Most of their power lines are underground, but in the US, the vast majority are overhead. And our country's infrastructure is pretty bad. I think most people are probably kind of aware of this, but let me quantify that. The American Society of Civil Engineers typically gives us a score or a grade on our infrastructure every few years, and it's usually like a D, D minus, D plus. Occasionally, if we're lucky, we'll get a C minus. So definitely it is a problem. There was an infrastructure bill passed by Congress, a bipartisan infrastructure bill, so that was a breath of fresh air to see both sides working together on that, and we're taking advantage of that. So what's our solution? We've got an underground real estate solution. So instead of aerospace, we're TerraSpace, and we've got two products. We're going to build tunnels, and we will either own them or we'll sell the tunnels. If we own them, it's called build, own, operate, and maintain, BOOM for short. And if someone else wants to own the tunnel, then we're doing boring as a service. So technically boring and drilling as a simple service. I had to add a few more words in there so it could spell badass. I'll share a quick video here.
So imagine a robot with 10 lightsabers on the front, just kind of vaporizing through all the rock and soil, and then a Mandalorian jetpack on the back, blowing out all the little bits of rock, like cornflake-sized bits of rock, and it can go so fast and so much cheaper than anything else out there. It's the power grid, transmission lines, it's our water pipelines, fiber. There's so many communities that don't have access to high-speed bandwidth.
So that video that you just saw was a demonstration for a few of our customers, including one of the largest utilities in Texas and the largest utility in California, as well as some investors that we had there. And I'll just point out, you saw the little bits of rock flying out of there. That's called spallation, when the rock breaks into little like cereal kind of bits. But you also saw a bunch of smoke. And I want to point out that there's no combustion in our process. We're not burning anything. Our two inputs are electricity and air. That's it. And so that smoke is actually vaporized rock, because what we're doing is we're passing air over an electric arc like lightning, and it's so hot it ionizes the gas, superheats the air into a plasma, and that's 27,000 degrees Celsius at the core, like the temperature of the surface of the sun. And around the edges, it's obviously less than that. But so that heat, that thermal and the kinetic energy, vaporizes the rock, and then it cools and precipitates or rains into silt. So our byproduct is sand and silt. And as I'll share later, we actually get paid for that material. We've got a great team, 3 founders, and there's more people on the team that aren't shown here. He's got a PhD from the Colorado School of Mines. I'm a seasoned founder. I've had 4 exits, and I'm also a unicorn founder. I founded Trade Wind Energy in the 1990s. It became the largest wind developer in the United States by 2017, although I sold most of my shares a long time ago. I'll highlight a few of our advisors. Kurt A. Bear, he's a former chairman of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC. He's also a former House of Representatives member. Rochelle Chong, she's amazing. She's also a former federal regulator. She's was with the FCC and also a California Public Utilities Commissioner. And then Dr. Kamen at Cal Berkeley runs the Rail and Switch Lab, works with all of the big regional transmission operators. Handful of other great people on the team, including Rachel Payne. She's the former CEO of Google.org, and a number of other amazing people. All right, so what's the advantage of using plasma to bore through rock and soil? We're a lot faster and a lot cheaper, about 100 times faster and about 90 to 98% cheaper. So 1 to 2 orders of magnitude less expensive. I always like to reference Elon Musk, because a lot of people have heard of him doing tunneling, the Boring Company, and it's great. He's done so much, and I have admired him. I've been driving a Tesla now for 10 years. Big fan of Elon. He's been trying to get to be as fast as a snail with his underground tunneling. We are already over 100 times faster than a snail with our technology. So who knows, maybe someday we'll partner up with Elon. And the market's huge. It's kind of obvious, $2 trillion market for tunneling. But I do want to highlight here that the proliferation of 5G, towers for faster, mobile communications, they're going up everywhere, and they're very heavy bandwidth hogs. Data centers are growing rapidly, for everybody watching Netflix and working from home and, crypto mining and everything else. And then EVs, we're electrifying our entire transportation fleet. Including commercial vehicles, even boats. Planes will be the last, but that transition of our transportation fleet, and also heating, where a lot of people in their homes are converting from gas to electric heat, same with buildings, that's going to put a 3 times increase on our grid. And that demand, there's no way our grid can handle that. In case you didn't know, our grid was never designed in the United States. Yeah, it's one of the largest machines ever built in the world, but it was never designed. It simply evolved over time as a patchwork of utilities, eventually kind of connecting with each other for convenience and to share energy. So it's actually a really poor design. There's 3 grids: the Eastern grid, the Western grid, and Texas, because, you know, at any moment Texas might want to succeed from the nation. And so we aim to change that. So we have a few designs and a number of patent claims, but instead of a circle, we're an arch. So there's more usable space. And we have 2 tunnel sizes, 2.5 meters in diameter and 8 meters in diameter. And so the smaller one, 2.5 meters for, you know, the United States is, I think, the only country left on the planet that still uses the old British feet and inches. So I've been doing everything in metric for decades. But anyway, 2.5 feet is about 8 feet. So I'm 6'2", so plenty of room for me to walk around inside the tunnel. And we'll have, in those tunnels, there'll be a space for a human-enabled space where there'll be a cart with little trailers behind it for service, maintenance, and installation of the various utility pipelines and conduits. And then the larger one, 8 meters, that's enough for a two-lane highway or rail lines, and we could have twin or quad tunnels for transportation uses. I do want to point out, however, you see here e-commerce parcel delivery. We have a signed letter of intent with a really cool company called Pipe Dream Labs, shown here on this next page. And Pipe Dream has a technology where they're going to move our Amazon parcels underground through tubes, taking thousands of trucks off the road. So pretty excited about being able to do that as well. We've achieved a few traction milestones. So 3 of our patent claims were published in the US last month in Canada, and globally should be official here later this year. 5 years of testing. Our first project is operational in Northern California. We have $6 million of signed contracts and a whole bunch more in negotiations. $5 billion of our BOOM projects. Again, that means build, own, operate, and maintain. Those are the tunnels that we will own to solve some of the big grid problems in the country. And we're in the late stages of applying for over $5 million of non-dilutive grant funding. Some pretty interesting partners that we have here as well. The traction that I'm most excited about, though, here is our permits and our property rights. So we have been approved as a regulated utility in 8 states, including California. This was not easy. It's been a couple of years, but all the states you see in dark green, we are a utility, and the ones in kind of medium green, we expect to be approved later this summer, and the light shade kind of seafoam green by the end of the year. So there'll be 30 states total where we will be a utility. So what's that mean? It means no one can say no. By far the biggest challenge of putting in new transmission lines is when they go overhead, people fight it. Of course they would, right? No one wants a new transmission line going through their neighborhood or their community. So the vast majority of proposed new projects, same with pipelines, the vast majority get denied because the public fights it. In our case, they can't say no. Of course, we're not going to be doing any fossil fuels at all. It's going to be 100% renewable energy. We will have hydrogen pipelines, but it'll be green hydrogen rather than conventional. But yeah, so we could actually bore a tunnel, and we're in development now on such a tunnel from San Francisco to LA and from San Francisco to Sydney, Nebraska. I mentioned the Eastern grid and the Western grid. That's one of the DC interties where those 2 grids connect, but they don't really talk to each other. Very little electricity can flow back and forth. Same in Texas. We don't have all the approvals yet to do the same thing in Texas, but you probably remember the big Texas power outages last year during the cold snap that they got. We can solve that with an HVDC line from LA to Texas. And by the way, we have a signed MOU with Direct Connect to help us develop HVDC lines around the country. So essentially, this is huge because for the first time in our country's history, we're going to be able to move large quantities of renewable energy across time zones and across these major grids in the country. That's never been done before. It'll make the grid a lot more reliable, and it'll save a huge amount of money. And because wind and solar are by far the cheapest source of new electricity, it's going to allow a lot of utilities to more rapidly shut down their coal plants and gas plants. So pretty excited about that. And then the map here on the right shows our crazy, audacious plan to build an underground supergrid across the country. Wrapping up here. So here's some of our projections and our competitor risk heat map. So green means low risk, red means high. Boring company I mentioned, Elon. Petra is a company I'm actually a big shareholder over there, but they're focused on smaller tunnels with a slower process. But the conventional tunnel boring machines and horizontal directional drilling, the underground infrastructure that we have has always been just crazy expensive, mainly because the geology risk is so high. And with our 20,000 degree or plus temperature, we can go through even the hardest rocks like basalt at 360 megapascals. And the last thing I'll point out here is, as I mentioned, we earn money for our spoils. And wrapping up, we started this really in 2016, but the idea was in 2015. I'll close with the story of how this came about. So in 2015, we had a solar farm with my previous company that I sold that we were developing, and we after about a year and a half, we were notified by the local utility that we had to downsize the solar farm by 75%. We had a contract, for X amount, but the grid could only handle 25% of it. So it was really frustrating, but it happens literally all the time. At least we were able to save the project. Like I said in the beginning, 80% of projects like that get completely abandoned. They just walk away because the grid can't take it. Anyway, we were having a happy hour, kind of commiserating, sharing tears with each other, metaphorically, in downtown San Francisco. And Dominic, who was one of our solar engineers, was bragging to his girlfriend. He's a former Navy SEAL. And he was bragging about how he and a SEAL team used to approach enemy ships or practice cutting through the side of a ship underwater. And then the plate of steel would fall in, water would rush in, they would rush in and practice, taking out the leaders and taking over the ship. He was like, yeah, that thing could take your arm off. We used a plasma cutting torch. It was 20,000 degrees. And we're all like, oh, dude, you're such a badass. Anyway, that night, middle of the night, I pop up out of bed. I'm like, plasma. I wonder if that could be repurposed to somehow melt rock. So I'm researching it. Yeah, actually, it's hot enough to vaporize rock. I'm like, surely somebody's doing this. And I looked and looked and looked. I stayed up all night. And yeah, sure enough, Los Alamos National Laboratory in the 1970s did some work on it. Then a new administration came in. They shut down the project. But I was like, yeah, okay, this will work. So I just couldn't stop thinking about the idea. Finally, as a kind of a side hobby, I hired a big engineering firm. They did a study and they said, yes, this will work. 2, nobody is doing it. Thank goodness, because I wanted this to be an opportunity. Number 3, you can bore at speeds of 1 kilometer per day, which is crazy fast. And number 4, they showed me what the operating cost would be, mainly the consumption of electricity and changing out the electrodes. I ran the math on that because I've hired companies over 100 times to bore tunnels under creeks, rivers, railroad tracks, you name it. And I'm like, holy cow, that's like, 90% less or better. And so that's how the idea was born. I'll wrap it up there. Anyway, so this is a world-changing tech. We're still private. We are going to probably take the company public in a few years. We're raising money now for the first time with outside capital, but it's world-changing tech. So I encourage you to follow EarthGrid and help us change the world.
Troy, that's awesome. I loved learning more about it on the podcast too. So if anyone's interested, we kind of dove a little bit deeper. But Troy, can you give a little bit more background kind of on your background as an entrepreneur in the renewable energy and clean tech world as well?
Yeah, sure. So I told the story of kind of how I got motivated to start a company in wind energy, but the story goes back even further, as I think that we talked about on the podcast. So yeah, I've been in solar for since 1980. So that's 42 years, if you can believe that. And it's because my dad built his dream house in the Midwest, and it was a big house, 7,500 square foot house. And he put a solar system on there, solar hot water system. So it heated the pool, the hot tub, the water in the house. And then in the wintertime, we would winterize the pool, and that heat coming in, even in the wintertime, in cold Kansas City winters, that was enough to heat the house, do most of the house heating. So it saved us a ton of money. Anyway, it was one of my chores to maintain that system in the 1980s in junior high and high school. So I've been around it a long time, but there weren't really any jobs in clean energy when I got out of business school. So I went in telecommunications and did well there. And then as soon as I read about the potential of wind, Florida Power and Light had installed the first wind farm in Kansas. And I was like, maybe that could be interesting. So I started the first wind farm company in Kansas, sold my telecommunications company. That was my first exit. Didn't make much money, but what I did make, I put it into the wind company and into savings, because I wasn't going to make any money or any salary for a while with the startup. And made a ton of mistakes, but hired some people that knew what they were doing, including some folks in California who had developed a bunch of wind farms. We formed a partnership with them. But long story short, we developed a few big wind farms in Kansas and other surrounding states. I sold most of my shares in the company back in 2004, and then I hired someone to run it so I could focus on my next company, solar. But like I said, it became the largest wind developer in the country.
That's awesome. One of the kind of random themes that came out of today was sort of going out and making it happen, problem solving. You told this really cool story on the podcast, and I kind of want to see if you'd share it again, basically how you had to kind of do all of this work in a span of like 6 months to get all these different projects coming together at once. Do you remember what that was?
Yeah, that was at Pristine Sun, my solar company. And this was back kind of in the early days of solar, of utility scale solar. Residential solar has been around for decades, but this was in, 2012 and 13. And so we had signed an agreement with Sanyo to provide us with solar panels and trackers and potentially other equipment for the solar panels. And it was exciting. It was a 50 megawatt joint venture, and we're super excited about it. And we had at that time about a year and a half before the projects had to all get built. There were 15 solar farms in California where we had contracts to sell the power. So we were going to own the projects and sell the power to a local utility on a 20-year long-term contract called a power purchase agreement. And so super exciting. Well, then we come to find out that Sanyo is going to get acquired by Panasonic. And some of you may remember this. And so we're like, okay, fine, but we assume Panasonic's going to honor this deal. And they assured us, yeah, no problem. Anyway, I'll jump ahead. When Sanyo was officially acquired, the next week, we found out that the new team at Panasonic that took over, they were like, nah, I don't think we're going to honor this contract. And we're like, what? Anyway, so really frustrating, because we would have lost those 20-year contracts on 15 solar farms. All of them had to get built by August 17th of 2013, a day I'll never forget. And it takes like 6 to 12 months typically to build one solar farm, and we had 15 of them to build. And so we're calling, we're hollering at them, what's going on? We got to get this funding. It's too late to bring anything else in. And so people around the industry, we were asking for other capital sources, trying to raise money, and everyone's like, no, those projects are dead. They're dead. There's nothing you can do about it. And finally, it dawned on me, oh, wait a minute. Terakawa-san, who was the head of the Sanyo division that did the deal with us, he had provided us with a press release. And so I asked my law firm, I'm like, hey, is there any reason why we can't issue this? Because it was going to be announced a little later. And it just sat there, and we had it in our files. Anyway, long story short, we issued the press release, and Panasonic starts getting all these calls from all over the world. It got picked up by like 7,000 media outlets. It was a really big deal. And they're getting calls of, congratulations, you did this great deal with Pristine Sun. It's so exciting. And they're like, oh, crap. So anyway, the money started flowing about a week or two later. No, I guess about a month later, we had essentially we had 6 months to build all of them, but most of the funds came in about 12 weeks, 3 months before all the projects had to be built. And that's why we call this, and we did it. We got them all built just in the nick of time. I mean, we brought in temporary lights. We had multiple crews working 3 shifts, sunrise to sunset, and then the lights came on all through the night at some of the bigger sites. And we got it done. And we call that portfolio the Phoenix 15, because they were dead and they rose from the ashes.
What was sort of your biggest takeaway from that as an entrepreneur or business owner?
To cast the net wide when you're raising capital. Don't rely on one funding source. Always have a backup plan.
Cool. And actually, that's something we haven't really talked about today, is funding. So can you walk us through sort of your initial process of going through raising capital for your businesses and what that generally looks like?
Yeah, sure. So, in the beginning, as I kind of mentioned, it was really tough. There wasn't a whole lot of money from my first exit to my second, and so we basically ate a lot of ramen noodles, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and hot dogs. I was single at the time, and then I got married in that during that company. Unfortunately, my wife had a good job, but then she left to be our CFO, and so it was tough because two both breadwinners at a startup. But by that point, we had made enough traction in the wind company that we used the press as our ally. So we issued a handful of press releases and had our own kind of grassroots campaign, PR campaign. We didn't hire a firm or anything like that because we didn't have the money. So we just went out and started knocking on doors and smiling and dialing to various news outlets. And anyway, I got a number of articles written about what we were trying to do. We hadn't built a single project yet. It was just all kind of pie in the sky, air for sale, if you will. And but fortunately, we got some attention and some ink out there in the press, and that allowed us to get some phone calls from angel investors. So we raised several $1 million from angels that realize, hey, you have all these site leases, you have some agreements from utilities to be your customers, you just need capital to finish the engineering and the grid studies and blah blah blah. And then, of course, we also signed the agreement with that other company in California as a partner to help guide us through the process. So, but I have to say it was tough. And if I hadn't have set aside enough money in savings from my previous job at AT&T and from and then after that from my previous company that I sold, if I didn't have that nest egg, I don't know if we would have made it. And if we did make it, I would have had to give up either most or all of the control of the company to outside investors.
When you're dealing with angel investors, what's something that they tend to look for you to most likely get a yes from them?
It's traction. It's traction. And so what we focused on was do as much as we could that cost as little as possible to get traction. And by that, I mean, driving around, getting, in that case, it was getting land leases for wind farms from landowners. And the landowners were like, all right, yeah, I can keep, raising cattle and growing my wheat until this project goes forward, because it was basically a conditional kind of a deal. So it didn't really cost us anything other than our time and their time, and some convincing. And then same with some of the other traction that we got, like some letters of intent with utility customers. And that was enough to get, the press and to get the investors interested. And then it's just an argument about, hey, the valuation, what's the company worth? And so we sold, if I remember correctly, we sold something like 30% of the company for a couple $1 million. And then there was a right for them to put in another $3 million as debt, which is non-dilutive, which they did when we achieved the subsequent milestones. And we were super scrappy. And that's important. You need to be sure to convince your investors that you can do a lot with a little. And I have a history of doing that. And my wife was instrumental in helping me with that as well. Alicia, she's in her own right a successful entrepreneur. She's got Earth Studios, her own company that does film and TV shows with a climate change theme to them. But yeah, we were super scrappy. We lived conservatively. We didn't have fancy offices. We didn't spend money on stuff that we didn't absolutely need.
Mm-hmm. Well, Troy, I want to thank you for being here. One of my goals as kind of putting this event together is to find people with interesting, cool backgrounds and people who do different things in, kind of this overall sphere. And one thing I think that's really cool about Troy is, in addition to all of this, he is an American Ninja Warrior. So we've got a couple more minutes. Troy, tell us a little bit about how you're able to run all these companies, do these amazing things, and then also be this athlete on American Ninja Warrior.
Yeah, I gotta stay strong. So I will say that at my age, it was not easy. I had to spend a fair amount of time training. So after I sold the solar company and started doing EarthGrid, I was working maybe 30 hours a week or so on EarthGrid. And so I had some time to train and get myself in shape. But what I found is that I had a dad bod. I was in my late 40s when I started. But I've been, doing yoga for 30 years. I've always eaten really well, almost all organic whenever possible. and I've been doing intermittent fasting for many years. So, since I started training. But what I found is that getting into really good shape, and I don't mean just cardio, I mean building lean muscle mass, it improved my metabolism and substantially increased my energy level. And I think it helped my brain too. And there's a lot of studies to support this. HIIT, high intensity interval training, and Ninja Warrior training is just that. But there's all kinds of other training where you can get that. So even if you're just spending 4 minutes a day of really intense exercise to get that heart rate and that lung capacity way up, it stimulates human growth hormone. I think it helps the brain in addition to the body. Anyway, so I find I have more energy to run my company. I sleep more deeply. I sleep better. I don't set an alarm. I just wake up, and when my body is done, I feel really well rested. So it's a key part of my success is being really in good physical shape.
Awesome. I agree. Couldn't agree more, actually. And if you're interested in that, tomorrow we have a speaker coming on who's a former Marine who teaches people how to basically optimize how to run a business and be extremely healthy at the same time. So if that's something you're interested in as an attendee, be sure to check that out. Troy, thank you so much. Doing amazing stuff. I love just kind of learning about what you're doing, and I can't wait to keep following your journey and watch EarthGrid grow. So appreciate it. I know a couple of people had some questions in here. I'm going to keep it moving just to stay on schedule, but Troy, is it cool if we drop your LinkedIn when we send a follow-up email to everybody and they can reach out if they have any questions?
Absolutely. Yeah. Feel free to reach out. Solar Ninja Troy is my Instagram and LinkedIn and Twitter handle. So feel free to follow me there or go to the website. Yeah. earthgrid.io.
Awesome. Troy, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it, Dylan.
We'll chat again soon. And we are going to keep this moving. Our next guest is ready to go. I'm just going to get him going on here.